environmental performance. And there are 18 objectives associated with this performance, and one of them concerns specifically biodiversity. And each of our objectives are sponsored by a member of the executive committee, which facilitates their deployment. The things I wanted to let you know too is that definitely when I'm sorry, I just want to check something. Yes. Yep, sorry. Yes, so we have been more ambitious on this week because, as I said previously, with Act4nature initiative, all companies' commitment must be made public. And this creates a very, very positive spiral because we challenge and inspire each other by benchmarking. So this has definitely forced us to be more ambitious, with the will of scaling up and working, of course, on our challenges that must evolve our practices and our businesses. So, for example, sorry, because it's too small, but if you could see, you would see that, for example, we took as a commitment to stop using pesticides to manage our green spaces areas, to move towards ecological management, to deploy our own biodiversity footprint tools. And now our commitments are more legible and they are more targeted. And so, yes, it's definitely more ambitious, and it is, there were also targeted for the entire perimeter of Veolia. So all this all this has led us to more smart commitment, with a plan defined for a shorter period of time. That's an important point, because previously it was our CSR plan was on the period 2015-2020, and now it is on 2020-2023 period, and it changed everything because it maintains a more sustained pace of commitment. So that's the main point I wanted to let you know. We also have a dedicated page on internet about our commitments. So that's the next slide. If you are interested, you can. Oh, sorry. So that's too small, but it is also our universal registration document for this year. So sorry, it's too small, but if you are interested, you will be able soon to have a look for them, and you will see that it is much clearer. And so yes, we have this dedicated page on internet. So that's another slide. And the last thing I would say about Act4nature International, that's a very important point, that behind recognition, we are also looking for emulation, discussion with other committed companies, sharing feedbacks on what works or does not, inspiration and good energy, and that's we definitely found within this initiative. So thanks, I'm done.
Thank you very much, Coline, for sharing with us how Veolia.
We can't hear you, Mathieu.
Yes, how you managed to commit for biodiversity, taking action for nature, and for being able to report on these actions. just before I give the floor to Karen, we are going to share with you the poll we were not able to share with you before. So feel free to answer it. We will share the result in a few minutes. So no, I give the floor to Karen. Karen, welcome to speak.
Yes, hi. Can you hear and see me?
Yes.
Great.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot. So I'm Karen Degouve. I'm head of sustainable business development at Natixis. So Natixis is the corporate and investment banking, insurance and asset management arm of BPC, which is a large retail banking group in France. What I will tell you is briefly why we got engaged as a financial institution in a biodiversity commitment, and I'll give you examples on what we committed to and what we have achieved, because we're in our first year of reporting on our SMART commitments as part of the Act4nature initiative. So it goes back a few years now. We came collectively as a bank, as an asset manager, and at the highest level of the company, to realize that while the climate crisis is one of the planet's greatest problem, it was not the only threat that needed tackling on the environmental front. And it's very important to understand that it's a trajectory or realization that happened at the highest level of the company. And that was really important for us to be able to drive and take global commitments at the company level. There's also, so we came to realize that collectively. There's also a growing concern about the significant financial risk stemming from biodiversity loss. And that's key for a financial institution who usually does not act on things that do not translate into some form of risk. Basically, we're still missing for biodiversity and natural capital the equivalent of the Stern report. I don't know if you remember the Stern report back in, I think it was published in 2006, if my memory is right, that measured the amount of dollars that were going to impact the global economy due to the climate crisis. We're still pretty much missing that for biodiversity and the impact on nature. But there are things out there, including the Global Futures Report from the WWF, for example. And there's an increasing knowledge in financial institutions that not only climate change, but impacts on the loss of ecosystems, the loss of biodiversity are going to have a financial impact as well. And the figure that I remember from the WWF report was that the damage to ecosystems could cost something like $10 trillion to the global economy by 2050. We still need, and there's still lots of work that needs to be done to be able to take into account that financial impact for financial institutions. But this is increasingly growing. And definitely that was one of the triggers that pushed Natixis as a bank, as an asset manager, to start working on how do we measure the impacts of biodiversity loss in our day-to-day business, in what we do, in the products that we offer to our clients as an asset manager, as a bank, and as an insurer. The key message there, I guess, is as a financial institution, we need to be able to measure, to be able to take into account. So starting a few years back, we started working on how could we measure those impacts to make sure that we take them into account. And that was part of the trigger as well to engage into that pathway that triggered us to take commitments in 2020, so basically last year. it was part of a global approach at the Natixis level. So we started a working group, and that was back in 2018, with our different businesses to work on those subjects, to try to, as I said, to try to put a measure on what impacts it would mean to our business, what impact it meant to our clients. And we started working with our business lines, all business lines, through a cross business line working group for 2 years that resulted in last year in a global commitment of the group to support biodiversity and to mobilize all business lines to support of biodiversity collectively. So we engaged in the Act4nature initiative, and we engaged all our business lines in the initiative. As was mentioned previously, the Act4nature initiatives means we need to take smart commitments that are time-bound, measurable, concrete, and additional, which is what we try to do, even if it's still pretty hard to measure and to make measurable commitments on the actual impacts that we have. So we started, but we thought it was important for us to start somewhere, even if it's not yet perfect, if we can't have all measures in place. We thought it was not an excuse not to be able to measure, not to be able to take those commitments. So we engaged all, as I said, all our business line in those commitments, and I'll give you a few examples of the commitments that we made as a bank, as an asset manager, and where we are today. The first one is a sort of a macro commitment to include biodiversity in our strategic planning. And that's will literally happen because our new strategic plan as a group is due to be published mid-2021, so mid this year. And you will see when this happens that biodiversity will be included in our strategic planning. So that was the first, our first macro commitment. Then we took a commitment to systematically include biodiversity into our stakeholders dialogue, and in particular with our clients. And we have a commitment to have 100% of all clients with whom we engage on sustainability issues that will include biodiversity by the end of this year. So this is really something that we have included systematically in our dialogue with clients. It's also included now in the objectives of our business managers, so originators. When our teams engage into conversations with clients on sustainability issues, biodiversity is now systematically included in those conversations. And it's not just, not everything is about climate. We engage, as I said, measure is really important. We engage into, we committed to assess the impact of our client in the most material sectors on biodiversity issues. And we had a commitment to have 100% of our new clients covered by the end of 2020. So that's one of the commitments that we assessed. And our universal document will be published. The audited part of our universal commitment will be published at the end of next week, actually. So, and you will be able to see that we have included in the document a table that shows what were our commitments and what we have achieved in 2020 compared to what the commitments were. And I'm happy to say that we have achieved that one commitment on the assessment of the impact of our clients in the material sectors. So we have achieved that 100% target for the new clients. If there is interest on what the material sectors are, we include in those mining and processing of metals, fossil fuels, obviously, power generation and transmission and distribution, water management, real estate, transport infrastructure, and agricultural commodities trade. So whenever we have an activity or a client that has an activity in those sectors, we are assessing the impact of our client's activity in as far as those sectors are concerned. We also committed to evaluate the impact of our financing activities in the same material sectors. We had a target of 50% of new transactions to be achieved in 2020. We have achieved 49%, so we're almost there. We expect that to increase to 100% next year, so we'll be following that very closely. We also had a commitment to measure the share of green spaces in our real estate assets, and that's for the investment front. We published the indicator for the first time in 2020, and the measure is 7%. So it was a commitment to measure and disclose. So that's happening. And then we had a commitment to integrate biodiversity in our decision-making process, and in particular in the ESG integration and insurance engagement in our asset management business. We are following that very quickly. Our commitment is to achieve a 100% in 2023 for the asset management companies that have committed to that target. And that's 5 of our major affiliates in the asset management field, covering approximately 40% of our total assets under management. That's particularly true of the most advanced affiliates, including Mirova and DNCA and Ostrom, for example. Those are brands of Natixis investment managers. And then I can't be exhaustive. I can't mention all the targets that we had, but I'll mention maybe 2 more because they are quite emblematic. One is to structure financing solutions that include specific biodiversity objective. We had a commitment to have to finance at least 5, or to structure at least 5 transactions per year in 2020 and 2021. We actually achieved 6. Last year, so we're quite proud of that. They're very specific financing transaction. They're quite innovative because they're focused on biodiversity targets. And the second a key commitment that I'll mention is that we had a commitment to, can you still hear me? Yes. Okay, because I had a message, my connection was bad. Okay, sorry about this. We had a commitment to develop investment strategies of our asset management activity in nature-based solutions. So that's for asset management to reach €2 billion by 2023. We, in particular, through 2 of our asset managers, Mirova and Thematics, in 1 billion for Mirova and 1 billion for Thematics. On the Mirova front, we have already reached more than 510 million euros to date through very specific biodiversity strategies, including the Land Degradation Neutrality Fund and the Sustainable Ocean Fund in particular. Maybe mention some of the specific funds that we developed for industrial clients, including the that we launched last year, the L'Oréal Nature Regeneration Initiative. And that's an example of a 50 million euro commitment that will be managed by Mirova on behalf of an industrial company, so L'Oréal in that case. And we also launched last year an interesting first EFT dedicated to biodiversity through one of our asset managers called OSIAM, which is called Food for Biodiversity strategy. It's quite small to date. It's $24 million of assets under management, but it's a start. As I said, we didn't want to, we needed to start somewhere. So, and OSIAM was not even part of the affiliates that we expected that were part of the commitment initially. So we're quite happy that we have new affiliates coming on board in this overall strategy. And maybe I'll finish on the commitments that we took with the we also took commitments on training our staff and on participating, actively contributing to initiatives in order to develop methodologies and measure for biodiversity impacts. So we're very happy at Natixis to be part of the building of the future TNFD, so the Task Force on Nature related disclosures. So we're actively participating as Natixis and Mirova as well on building that future format to actually measure and disclose biodiversity impacts for not only for financial institutions, obviously, but for all companies. I hope I'm not too long, and I'm happy, obviously, in the course of the conversation to take any questions on how financial institutions can contribute.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm going to give the floor to Eva and Claire, but just before I wanted to share with you the result of the poll, and it's quite obvious that the two biggest drivers of corporate action, according to you, are investors and regulation, and just after come customers. So Claire, you see this result, this poll. What do you think about this with these results? Does it surprise you? Or?
Well, it does not really surprise me, because investors, customers, and regulation are actually the three main drivers for business action on any topic. So nice that biodiversity is perceived and lived as a topic. What I thank you very much, but it's a very interesting poll. Thank you for your inputs, all of you. And I see we have a very international audience. So maybe I will start to say that EPE, Entreprise pour l'Environnement, is a French partner of WBCSD, which is probably more known internationally than us. And what I wanted to do, give you two, three remarks, drawing on Coline's and Karen's presentations about what they have done, trying to question the link with value. We are in the We Value Nature challenge, and they have spoken quite little on value. So I thought it was interesting to take that topic and to see where is this value in these two examples, where you see that neither company has really done a complete valuation of their impacts and dependency. They have obviously done a very in-depth materiality analysis, but not done something from absolute values, but more from their own impact and dependency, and also a lot from qualitative and stakeholder dialogue. And really the action is start action and then try to draw measurement and draw figures from the kind of action that they have done. So the first thing I was on the 2 points. One is who is we in the We Value Nature. And I think that from the two examples that we have seen, it's a little bit like your poll, Mathieu. We see that it's not only the company or an absolute way to calculate the value of the action or the value of the biodiversity, the impact, but that the value is actually shared by many people. First thing, a very interesting point is that the commitments are signed by Antoine Frérot in the case of Veolia, by the CEO of Natixis as well. And so it's the leader, but it is also a commitment, and action is done by many other people and by the stakeholders and partners that have actually confirmed that these commitments that you have mentioned are smart. So the we is a collective body, collective group of people, and which is an interesting collective judgment on what is sufficient, reinforced by the fact that the commitments and are public. They are in the report, which is open to everybody. And so the evaluation is actually done not by a computer tool, but by many people looking at what is actually done. So the value is interestingly enough, maybe will evolve in time, and you see the difference between Veolia's commitments between 18 and 20 they are much more precise, they are much more action oriented, and there are many, reduce phytosanitary products by 75% is a very clear figure, number indicator, and action oriented, because you have to find other ways to do. So that was my comment on the who is we in the we value nature. And then on the monetary value or the values, obviously you see that these decisions and will rely, and one of the commitments is to use monetary valuation for each decisions where it is possible and relevant, which is many. So as a result, you see that it will be very different ways to calculate values, given that they will have to be adapted to the various decisions. And if you take only one example, sometimes you have to choose between climate and biodiversity. And that might be a question that I would like to hear Coline and Karen on, is sometimes you have to decide if you want to give priority to climate or to biodiversity. Let's say when you fund renewables or something like this. And how do you measure this, and how do you instruct these decisions? That could be very interesting to see. So that's the comments and questions that I wanted to make from these two interventions. And I will stop here and maybe respond or raise other questions. Maybe yes, join EZP, a membership organization. Yes, we are an association of a little bit more than 50 companies of all sectors. And yes, we have members that invest directly into nature conservation. Many of them have partners. As you have seen, Karen Natixis is a member, and they do invest with a commitment to invest up to 2 billion in taking biodiversity into account. So that's, I think, the response to the first question that I wanted to respond immediately. But Eva, I will give you the floor for more comments, and back in a minute for debates.
Yes, Eva, maybe before Karen and Coline answer to the class question, would you like to say a few words? You heard about Veolia and Natixis presentation. What did you think about them?
Well, thank you so much. It was really, it was really great to hear the presentations. And so for those who don't know, Business for Nature is a global coalition that really tries to unify the business voice, the leading business voice, to drive policy ambition on nature. And we're hearing more of these examples of companies that are ready to challenge themselves and be challenged by others. So we heard, Coline was talking about how IUCN and others will be challenging their own strategy and their own metrics, and making sure that, scientific-based decisions are made, that the information is essentially going to become financial grade and auditable information, that it's all about managing risks. And I think what these examples demonstrate makes me question a few things. And I think collectively it's our responsibility to question a few things. We need to wonder, how do we know whether the reductions and the targets set are enough? And those are the questions that the stakeholders are helping each individual company with, to make sure the process is clear. But essentially the question is, are we operating within the planetary boundaries or not? To Claire's point about the interrelation between climate and nature, I think it's a fair question to ask their trade-offs, and those trade-offs exist also within water and livelihoods and jobs and inequality, across the board. But most of the time, this research suggests that you can actually tackle nature and climate together. And so we should be emphasizing and focusing on those win-win situations, even though we must remain aware of those where there is the trade-offs. But so, as Karen said, it's just a start. Some of this is just a start. And I think the question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we get from these really amazing, great examples, which are still mostly voluntary pilot tests, to the widespread mandatory rules being shifted, how do we scale and speed up as a momentum rather than the individual cases? And I think it's very telling that the poll came out with, of course, investors, regulation, and customers being the first one. So that means we need to change the rules of the game. And clearly, if you're, as we heard from Coline, if you're required by law to disclose extra financial information, you will. If harmful subsidies then get redirected by law to much more positive outcomes, you will change your practices as a result. One question around what's the equivalent of the Stern review for nature? Well, in fact, I would argue that it came out just recently from the UK Treasury, which commissioned the Degouve review, which basically states that our demand on the planet far exceeds what it can supply. So we need to change our economic measures of success. And in there, for example, you know, we talk, the Degouve review does talk about the fact that we must eliminate harmful subsidies that damage nature to about $4 to $6 trillion per year and redirect them to more sustainable, circular, regenerative business models. And that also in the long term will reduce the risk profile of those investments. So I think we've touched upon through these examples a number of really challenging points, really compelling, helpful points, but it feels to me like these companies, Veolia and Natixis as examples right now, could scale and speed up their efforts so much more, obviously, if the whole system transformed. And they're basically saying, we're ready to go, you know, and so there is a collective voice that all of the companies, I hope, on the line and those that you all work with take part in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva. Claire, would you like to add something about what?
Well, yeah, I could. I wanted to comment on Eva's point. How do we know when it is enough? And I think that we will know in a very, very long time where we are. But what is sure is that you can intuitively, or a panel can decide if it is progress and if this progress is good or not. Even the net zero is actually difficult to calculate, and I know that starts to be a target, but it's a very difficult target because you have to say that apples and oranges have to be equivalent in some way. But at least you know, and I think that it is very clear that when you see the commitments from the two companies, you see that they are really improving, becoming more demanding, and more geared towards concrete action. So that's an important point to at least be sure you are going to progress. Maybe I see in the chat a very interesting question on the privately protected areas, which is very interesting. It is the concept is it exists in France. It is. I did not know it was a network, global network on this. What we can say is that several members of EPE have actually initiatives of that nature, and I just wanted to mention Caring, which has protected a very wide area in Central Asia, where they grow well. Local people grow cashmere goats, and they are actually now in the process of protecting the valleys where there are these cattle, so that it is not too many goats and that it is not over pastured. So yes, there are, and you have another one in South America where one of the brands of LVMH, which is also another member, has done the same kind of thing with the Vigogne, which is a very beautiful wool kind of animal. It's not a goat, but close to. And so, yes, there are initiatives now with some companies that are starting to do this at large scale, which is very interesting, because then they can protect a complete ecosystem. So that's my my point for now.
There is also a question about greenwashing and what we can do against it. Is there?
Well, maybe Karen and Coline could say. Do you do you feel reception from your public, critics or appraisal?
I can make a quick comment on this and on the value question, Claire, that you had. NGOs are there and they're very active, especially with the financial sector. So it's great, because that is the best way to protect, especially the financial sector, against greenwashing. I think we have, you know, the financial sector collectively has been, especially in Europe, has been moving away from greenwashing. I don't think you can say that any of the banks today involved in sustainable finance are greenwashing anything. So, and that's thanks to the pressure from our, you know, from third parties, including the NGOs, including our clients, including the investors. And that's a really good thing. I also wanted to make a quick comment on the value question, on the we value nature. Who's the we? It's complicated when you're in the financial sector, because obviously our direct impacts are very little. All the impacts on nature, on climate, on the environment, even on society at large, they're pretty much all indirect impacts through the actual impacts of our clients for the banking activity, through the issuers, the impacts of the issuers for the investment part. So we can only do as much as what our clients and issuers can do. So industrial companies, pretty much. But we have a role to play as an intermediary in offering sustainable banking products, in offering sustainable investment funds, and so on, in particular in the subject that we're talking about today on biodiversity. Are we doing enough? Probably not. I mean, no, surely not. But you know, 2 billion euros target of investment focused on biodiversity impacts is already quite a large amount, but it's definitely not enough. And the issue there is, I think, that investors and companies altogether often fail to put a price tag on the benefits that they receive from the natural world. And that's the main issue. How do you put value on something that doesn't have a price of use? And we take value from biodiversity and ecosystems in many different ways. But again, we do not pay for those benefits. And as citizens, as investors, as bankers, as companies, because there's no price on using nature, it's quite different to put value. And I think the big step that we have, you know, already taken, even if I agree it's not yet enough, is that by offering biodiversity focused investment funds, such as the LDN or the Sustainable Ocean Funds, we are actually putting value and offering value to investors on something that doesn't have value, that is not priced yet. And there's probably a lot that should be expected from regulation to be able to put a price on the use of nature so that this price would translate into value. I hope that's clear.
That's clear.
Thanks. I was just going to actually, oh, sorry, Coline was going to reply.
No.
Go for it.
Go ahead.
I was just going to build on what Karen was saying, because it really resonated. So a lot of companies and financial institutions welcome the NGO pressure, because in a ways it really helps drive the agenda forwards. I think we also are at a really important point here, is that for once, people are actually looking at the information that is being provided. So there may not be an intention for greenwashing, but the decisions are based on the best available information, at least trying to take on board the best available information. So when you look at environmental, social governance, ESG data, there are so many different, I would say, issues. And it's that now the fact that, that may sound very negative. The idea, there is an increasing interest in ESG performance alongside financial performance, which is really good. And because that interest is growing and the momentum is growing, more and more people are now saying, well, let's look under that ESG hood and hang on a second, what were the assumptions that you made? Where does the information come from? How do you track that progress? Can I be sure that this ESG or sustainable investment is actually leading to the right actions on the ground? Those are completely legitimate questions. And it's this next phase that we're entering. We've kind of managed to get nature, biodiversity, ESG onto the agenda now, and it's going up. And we're now facing the very healthy questions of, well, what does it actually mean in the next phase? And how can we make sure that it becomes mainstream and that it holds up when the financial profits and the financial short-term performance on finance alone is questioned, because that's the real challenge when we come to that. Thank you.
We have 5 minutes left. If there are any company in the audience who succeed to commit for nature and is already taking action for biodiversity and who wants to share with us its feedback, you're very welcome to take the floor.
Maybe Mathieu, I can add something about greenwashing.
Yes, please.
In a few words. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes, with the executive committee, because I said previously we have a sponsor at the executive committee level on the biodiversity topics, and we always have this question: is it enough? We want to have an impact, and all the commitment we took, will they be enough to reach our targets? So yes, I would say that we have to be careful. We tried for our commitment to check with our impact, our challenges, our future issues, to be sure that it will be enough. I think it will never be enough, but yes, we tried to take all this commitment with the perspective of all our impact and issues, and it's going better. And plus, before, as it was said, climate is the priority, but now biodiversity it starts to become a very big issue, and I can feel within Veolia and within other companies that it's growing. That's what I could say.
Thank you, Coline. Well,
do you want to conclude?
Yes, Claire and Eva would like to give a short conclusion here.
I just wanted to recall one of the scientists we invited lately in EpE was questioned to say what should we do as businesses, what should we do? And his recommendation was extremely short but extremely difficult, which is extremely unusual in a business context, which is cultivate heterogeneity. And this shows, and I think the examples we have just heard from both Karen and Coline shows that actually this has value in that we see that the dynamics of this commitment is actually strong. And as Coline and Karen have said, it's not enough, but we go further. And it is what they have done is really a dynamic to include more questions, open new challenges, react to new challenges, and introduce new activities that are good for nature. So that's a very productive dynamics, as I was saying. Thank you to everybody, and I very much hope to
Claire, if I can make a last comment, I would really encourage, I'm not sure who is in the audience, but I would really encourage all companies to join initiatives similar to Act4nature, or Act4nature if they can, international, but similar, because it really helps you structure your commitments and the measuring of your commitments, the reporting of your commitments. And that's where you start, the movement. I agree with you, it's never going to be enough, but it's really a pathway. That's what you should have in mind. Engage in that pathway. Don't let the big scale ambition being the enemy of doing something. Start small and then progress every year. That's really the objective.
Thank you, Karen. So it remains for me to say a big thank you to all the speakers and to all of you for being with us this morning. I hope this session was helpful to you and will inspire you to take action and commit for nature. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.